That if you represent a faith, and if we're specifically talking about the Jewish people, if you're representing Judaism as a Jew and say that you're religious, then I encourage every one of us, because I also consider myself religious, that you live to a higher standard. And that higher standard is how you treat your fellow man. You can be you can be a religious zealot if you like, and do the tefillin and the prayers, and what I'm saying, you're that guy. But if you're treating others disrespectfully, right? You cut in line and you just act like a total turd, you're putting a bad taste in other people's mouths and making them feel, well, that's what religion is. And so my goal and I feel my responsibility as being representing the religious amongst the community is that is to represent it in a way that is honorable, and that to the point where I've had people say, like one of the guys came up to me and says, because he saw me take off my tzitzit from my uniform, and mind you, we sleep together in the same room and everything. He goes, "Wait, you wear tzitzit? Like you're religious?" Because he's one of the newer guys, to be fair. And I go, "Yeah," and he's like, "Wow, I didn't realize that." And I went, "Perfect."
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
Welcome everyone to the Jew Function. I'm Leo, and Seth is not here today. All the missiles in Israel, I guess, threw off his plans in New Jersey. Whatever it is, we are not stopping, and we are here as usual to talk about the Jews and talk about anti-Semitism according to the laws of nature. We invite you, if you're new to the show, if you're just stumbled upon this episode, it's going to be a great episode. I'll let you know in a second who's going to be our guest today. But if you just got here by accident, there are no accidents, but you are strongly encouraged to check out the first season, the first 22 episodes, where we lay out the entire history of the Jewish people and the story behind anti-Semitism, the way we see it, explained according to the laws of nature, backed by historic patterns, the words of Jewish sages, and recent findings from network science. It all adds up beautifully, I might say. And we talk about it in those first 22 episodes. There's also a great learning experience on thejewfunction.com. And you can follow us everywhere at the Jew Function, on X, on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, wherever there's a gathering of people, will be there. So that's us, and we invite people here to talk about their point of view. We invite people here who have a point of view on anti-Semitism, not simply the symptoms and what's going on in the world. Is it up? Is it down? Is it dangerous? Is it more dangerous here or elsewhere? It's important information, but there are great podcasts for that. We are inviting people because we want to connect with people, because we believe everyone have a little point in the heart that feels some great truths about Jews. And we believe that if we want to solve this problem, really solve it, not just alleviate some of the symptoms or push it by another 10, 20 years, we want to solve it, we got to get to the root of it. And so we invite people who have a great point of view, who are already active, either for the Jews, sometimes against the Jews. We've had some great conversations. Check those out. Today I have an amazing guest, and I'm not saying it lightly. Every guest is special, but this guy is really an all-around. He's a real mensch. He's an international speaker. I think he's been an active duty since 2003, fighting with the IDF, and then staying on as a reservist and as an elite special mobility unit within the IDF. 20 years of experience in Gaza, Lebanon, Judea and Samaria. He's active right now. In fact, he was not far from where I live at the scene of where the missile hit in Petah Tikva just 2 days ago. So it was very close. And beyond that, he's also a great communicator, and he's worked on a really interesting project. It's called I Am Israel, and I think now there's a sequel, I Am Israel, the Mountain of the King, about the Temple Mount. We'll talk to him about that. And he's also active with Cry for Zion, a movement advocating for Jewish rights on the Temple Mount. So it's very busy. I don't know how he had time to also get married and have 4 kids. Maybe we'll get some tips on that as well. But I'm very, very happy to not spend this evening by myself in the safe room here. So please welcome Doron Keidar.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, man?
Tired.
Yeah, I forget you.
I'm pretty tired. It's been, like you just pointed out, a very busy season for my team and I, being that we're both deployed and trying to manage our lives, our families, and conducting operations in Gaza, very complex operations that basically throw off your sleeping schedule as is. In addition to, we have to run to shelters in our break time when we're trying to catch up sleep because of Iranian rocket attacks, etc. So it's been a very interesting season, and I think what's really the positive of this really is that I would say we're living in the most historic season ever in the time of history for the Jewish people, and I would say also for the world. This is a very pivotal moment, and I see it as a privilege, even though it's wearing us out. It is a privilege if you step aside and look from the side for a moment and see what we're involved with. It's an immense privilege, because I know as a child, the last time I was a part of anything this big in my mind, in my history of wars, was probably the Gulf War. And that time I was just a teenager and did not get to participate in stopping the bad guys. This time I get to participate in stopping the bad guys. And that's a huge privilege in many ways.
Wait, you were here in 1991?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was living in Kiryat Shmona, and literally we were under, constant a rocket fire, both from Lebanon and also from Iraq. And my brother and I were the only ones that did not get evacuated out of the town, of all the children. They got all the children out during that war and sent them down to Elad and hotels and whatever, because my parents, being American and not really good Hebrew speakers, I guess they just didn't get the memo. So we literally lived through the Gulf War, where the areas that were targeted during the war.
Yeah, I was in Tel Aviv. I remember it vividly. I even made a short, funny movie about it when I was years later when I was in New York. But so your parents are, just to get the story, because you're clearly you sound American, but you grew up here. Give us a little bit of a genealogical background here. Just go a few generations back. I don't know, the Abraham. Just something.
Well, I'll give you the skinny, because it is a very different story for most Israelis growing up here. My family are originating from the United States. Both my biological parents came from Christian homes. My father grew up in a Protestant home, and my mom actually was Catholic. My father grew up in a pro-Jewish home, pro-Christian. They weren't necessarily Zionists, but they believed in defending the Jewish people. And so during World War II, my dad was 15 years old, lied about his age, and joined the war, because that's how deeply impacted he was by his father, who made it very clear that the Jewish people are God's chosen people and we have to defend them. And so that was my dad's passion, and that's essentially what led to, years later, as an electrical engineer that he had learned through his service in the military. He was in the naval submarine units, and so he learned electrical engineering, even though he didn't finish high school and all that. And then when he got out of the war, he started electrical engineering and became one of the top contractors in Fort Lauderdale, Miami during the building booms of the 60s and 70s and so on. And then after the Six-Day War, they needed U.S. contractors to come to Israel as part of the negotiations with Egypt. That America said, fine, we'll send contractors and all kinds of different infrastructure as part of that deal. And so my dad, of course, jumped on that. And that's where he had met my wife shortly after that. Met my mother, his wife, shortly after that, his third wife, which was my mother. And she was not a Zionist. She was not all into all that, but she was willing to live in the Middle East, in the middle of a war-torn country like
she
Israel.
Was roped into the Middle East, yeah.
and basically roped into his crazy idea. And that's how my brother, both my younger brother and my twin brother, were born here. And we had a tragedy in our home. My twin brother died at 2 years old from a smoke fire that I really, by miracle, survived myself, because we were both in the same crib together. And so I shouldn't have survived either, but I did. And that essentially derailed my family, that whole tragedy years later. And we essentially, my younger brother and I ended up in foster care. And then the rest is history, kind of, if you like, got married and started my future, and went to Bible school, studied theology in the U.S., came back to Israel.
Okay. So I was missing that part. So
yeah,
the tragedy happened here, but then they went back home, and that's when you yourself made the move back to Israel.
No, so I ended up in foster care in Israel, in Haifa. Oh, so we left Kiryat Shmona to Haifa to a foster family that took care of us. The father was a former actor. He was the professor of the performing arts in Fordham University. He's the one that founded, if you like, Denzel Washington. And then at the height of his career, like that, acting with people like Anthony Hopkins and films and all that, he literally just left it all to start a drug and alcohol rehab in Israel. And so that's how he and his wife ended up in Haifa.
Was he Jewish?
No, he wasn't. He was a Christian. His wife was Jewish. So his wife was Jewish, which is why they came to Israel, because they were part of a church ministry. It's a big ministry in America called Teen Challenge, and it came out of a very well-known church in New York City called Times Square Church that was pastored by David Wilkerson, who is a very, very big, like a legend, if you like, in the evangelical world in those days. He's no longer with us, but that was who his mentor was. That's who he got a passion for, working with drug addicts and alcoholics and helping them get rehabilitated. So they wanted to copy that in Israel, because they were shocked when the husband and wife came on a honeymoon to the wife's homeland, right? So he's a Bible, got real deep into Bible and prophecy and all these things, and he's like, let's go to your homeland. And so here he's studying about Israel, right, as a Christian that's passionate about Israel, and they discover in the early 90s that there's a drug pandemic in Israel. And it kind of blew them away, especially when they found out that in Jerusalem, of all places, because it's like Jerusalem, the city of gold, the holy city, and there's sin and bad things here. Like, is that even possible? You know what I mean? So it's like this dreamy idea that these Christians had that got kind of shook with reality, so to speak. Kind of like the Ethiopians, when they talked about like the Sig celebrations that they would have in Ethiopia, and they would talk about, one day we'll go to Jerusalem, the city of gold, and then they got here and there's no city of gold. Where's the gold? So it's kind of like that. People around the world have their ideas about Israel because of the way they read the Bible, and they imagine in their head they don't have a real connection to what things are today. So any case, all of that led them into starting drug and alcohol rehab in Haifa. and friends of friends knew my family, knew about uh, basically my father had become an alcoholic. My mom was in and out of the mental institution, and so it was a very unstable home reality. And at this time, I was 13 years old. My brother was 11, and they suggested that we would go to the husband and wife that started this rehab, that maybe they could help us, even though the parents aren't going to go and get help, like my dad, for example, to get rehabbed himself. But maybe you can do something with the kids, because it's a sticky situation. And so that's what ended up happening. And we went there. And like I said, I kind of fast forward there. And essentially that led me to also wanting to study theology, went to Bible school in America, came back, started doing my military service. And essentially that was the next pivotal point for myself and my wife. I was married for 3 years at this time. My mom had just passed away shortly before that, which was part of the reason why I also went to the US, so I could be with my father and honor him for his last years. So I actually suspended my military service. Instead of going in '99, which was my original call up date, I ended up joining in 2003, 4 years later. So I was much older than the rest of the guys. Married for 3 years, had already been to college, and yeah, so I basically came in there on a totally different kind of mindset than most of the young guys there. And that was, and essentially that was another turning point for my wife and I, because besides learning how to be a warrior, learning how to be a fighter in the IDF and fight in Gaza, because my unit fought in Gaza, we also ended up with a spiritual journey, which led us to eventually become Jewish. My wife and I ended up converting through a program that we started, or I started by myself, because it's a military program called Nativ. And that's essentially a course for non-Jews, but also kids who are Jewish but grew up abroad. And it's a program to essentially, it's kind of like Taglit. They kind of show you the country, you tour. It's like a touristy style course in the first phase, but they also teach you Judaism, and they teach it to you from a multi spectrum. But at the end of the day, you have to realize you're going to go through the final conversion process, which is going to be through the Orthodoxy. So that's what you need to kind of aim towards in your studies. But they still kind of gave us lectures from the different spectrum. And it was very interesting, and it changed my worldview. Of course, it really challenged what I'd already learned in Bible school and what I just learned growing up. And I guess also being that weird kid who grew up in a Christian home, but went to synagogue because of my neighbors in Kiryat Shmona, and had a Moroccan, Middle Eastern flavor of Judaism in my upbringing, and in the customs and in the holidays and so on. So that it just really fit for my worldview and where I reached in my spiritual journey at the time. And that's why eventually, like I said, my wife and I decided that we wanted to continue, not just enjoy this wonderful course that the military offered for me, but really to continue on and finish. And yeah, so the rest is history after that, and ended up again in that new phase in my life, ended up into working in defense, security and defense for Israel. And that's essentially what kind of pointed me in the direction of what I've been doing for nearly 20 years now. So. Wow.
I thought I was a cosmopolitan Jew. You're like putting me to shame. I mean, you got Catholicism, Protestant, Jews, drug and alcohol. I mean, wow, that's a crazy story, man.
Yeah,
and you live in Bet Shemesh, right? We had a bunch of guests.
Yes, sir. Yeah, in the mountains of Bet Shemesh. I never tell anybody where I actually live, but yes, it's in the mountains.
You don't have to.
It's in. Well, the work that I do, it kind of puts a target on you. But yeah, so we live in the beautiful mountains of Jerusalem here, overlooking where David fought Goliath. Just all of the biblical history surrounding you. So it really puts things in perspective that every time I drive to Gaza to go fight the modern day Philistines, so to speak, it's just kind of fun. You feel like you're taking part in history, just like when you read about David and you read about, the wars of Israel with Joshua leading the children of Israel fighting against these mega battles in all these areas.
Right.
It's like, okay, so we're doing that today. It's it's just another chapter in the Jewish people's history, which is just amazing to be a part of.
So this is really amazing, because I think, I mean, it seems like you grew up more steeped in Bible stories and biblical history than even an average kid. When I grew up, I went to school. It wasn't today progressive craziness. It was, you had Bible classes every year, and you had to do take the Bagut, the SATs at the end, and all that.
Yeah.
But it seemed like something that just happened back then.
Right.
That's kind of best case scenario. Worst case scenario is like some made up fairy tale that we're still holding on to. That's how I grew up thinking about the Bible. But for you, it seems like it's almost like a direct extension. You grow up in it. You're surrounded by the stories. Then you transport it to the Holy Land, almost through an unimaginable chain of, one would say, coincidences. There are no coincidences, but and then you find yourself now in the middle of the. How does that feel? I mean, how do you see the Bible? I guess maybe that's the question that I'm leading towards. What's your relationship to that book? Because we have a really very special point of view on it, but I want to hear you first. And
well, to me, the Bible is both a historic record, right? And it's also, but it's also real. It's also true, for me. There's a lot of things in there that people are like, come on, the Red Sea being split. I mean, or Jesus walking on water. Come on, and I get it. I get that there are parts of the Bible, both in the New Testament, Old Testament, that people are going to always criticize and have issues with. But it's never been an issue for me. Like, I've always grown up believing these stories to be true, first of all, but also going to Bible school, you learned how to look at the Bible and prove to yourself, like, well, why is this true? Like, you dissect it. They give you tools on how to dissect Scripture and theology or ideas that we believe. Well, why do we believe that? Does it really say that? And then I had a really good professor that really, really kind of got your thinking going of, well, why do we believe that? Like common Christian ideas that most Christians all agree, like across the board, so to speak. But then he would start to like prove the opposite, and he'd give you scripture to do that. And we all just sat there like confused, like these young confused kids, so to speak. I mean, not all of us were kids, but at that time I was in my 20s, and I was just kind of like, oh my God, like he just crushed like everything I thought was true by improving it to not be true in a few sentences. And he's like, you see how easy it is if you don't know what you believe, and you have to really know that not because I said so, because Professor so-and-so said so, but you need to prove it to yourself. So that challenged me to really, dive deep into Scripture. And it's essentially also why it led me to the path that I took in my life and choosing the Jewish faith, just because I questioned things, and I never felt easy with just an answer. I wanted to get to the root of it. Well, what's the truth, And so I've always been like that. Just, I want to get to the truth of the matter. I want to get to the heart of a matter, not just to take it at face value, so to speak. And, when it comes to my relationship to the Bible, it's also something that, in a way, it's something I've always had as a young man, as a teenager. I remember like you just talked about, that's exactly what I had. I studied arts in Vitzo and Haifa, for my high school. And so it was a very progressive school, if you like, when it comes to religion. Yeah. And the Bible class, my teacher was very, would you say, she was very much about trying to prove how the Bible isn't unique, and the Jewish people's story isn't, like the flood or whatever. She's like, oh, here's another story.
Common myth. Everybody shares those myths.
Yeah. And it really bothered me. I was like, hey, and I remember saying, like, raising my hand, said, is this Bible class or is this the class of mythology in other religions? Just so we get this clear, Right. Oh, no, it's Bible. I said, well, what you just said is not true then. Well, what do you mean? Well, you can't, either it is what it says it is, or you want to say it's relating to something else, but it can't be and or. It doesn't, you don't do that. And so she actually got really mad with me. And when I had my tests, she asked my foster mom to come in and did a review with me and said, your kid here, he's stubborn. He won't answer the answers on my tests that I'm asking. What are you asking him? Well, the story about whatever, I forget, but a biblical story. And okay, so he gave his answer of what he knows the story. He knows the Bible really well. Our family in our home, we read the Bible. My husband is he's a very learned man. He's was a professor. I mean, like on very big levels. He's read and memorized like whole volumes of some of the greatest philosophical thinkers and whatever of history, right? And he's like, but this is what we teach them at home, like that the Bible's true. And this is, they're not dumb people. Right. And so she's like, well, if he can put my answer, which is basically talk about mythology and prove her ideas that she taught us, and then put his answer on the side, then that's okay. And I remember I looked at my foster mom. She's like, well, it's a compromise. I looked at her and I was like, you know what? Just because I don't want to embarrass her in front of the teacher, I'll just be like, okay, sure, let's just get this over with. And then when we left, I said, I am not answering anything like that on her test. If I get a 0, I get a 0. I said, but the Bible is true, and it is what it is. If she doesn't like it and she wants to teach something else, then don't call it Bible. She's the one who's lying, not me. And it was just like that,
Nice.
And so it's kind of, in a way, that's kind of been, like an anchor in my life, I guess, that if you want to seek out, we're talking about religion and who is God and what's the truth and what Bible to believe, what scripture, what prophet, however you want to look at it, right? You go on your spiritual journey and you follow that truth that leads you. And you also make enemies along the way because, if you're a person like me, you're just not going to, swallow the collective, this is what we all believe. Because I just because I've converted to Judaism doesn't mean that I just kind of swallow the collective whole of this is what we believe. I still question things, and I'll also disagree with maybe mainstream ideas and opinions. And I mostly keep it to myself because I know that people get offended by, I guess more of a academic, historic digging into the truth of the matters of things, especially when it comes to religion. It's a touchy area. People get offended on all sides.
We like to touch it. It's good. It's okay.
Sure. But I just said, so if some people try to have that conversation, they just get lit up, and it's like, because you're touching holy cows, you know what I mean? And
it's okay. We love cows.
Yeah.
The point is, for me, it's funny. I'll just share this because for me, I also grew up in a very, logical house. My dad's a physicist. My mom's an architect. So, there's arts, there's science, there's all those things. Yes, there's Bible, there's there's tradition, all those things. But it's a book on the shelf somewhere. There's certain customs we follow, and that's about it. There was no real digging. The Bible was back then, 2,000 years ago, and now we have what we have now. You can look at the correlations, you can, that's fine. Nobody was taking it too seriously. And also, Ashkenazi secular Jews that try not to make a big fuss about anything, just whatever. But then I started, I left Israel actually to find answers. I was really I swore that for me, not religion. I didn't want anything to do with religion. I grew up in the 80s where the Orthodox community here grew stronger. They got into politics. Started to people were burning bus stops with ladies in bikinis on them. They were torching those. So to me, it was like, kind of like some weird, fanatic, old world relics, not where I will find my answers. But after going around and around and around, at some point, I found, I started to find Kabbalistic texts, and they were saying two things that really got to me. One was that if, we could write better stories than the Bible, Harry Potter, why that particular story is the story that's been, attached to us and to our people, and has been following us throughout history, and was the first book ever printed. Everybody knows it. It's had such an influence on the world, and you can make up better fairy tales. So why that story? Why this particular strange collection of stories? So that was a good, okay, that's a good point. Why not make Harry Potter the Bible? It's crazy enough. It has all kinds of craziness and magic and all that. Yeah. No, it's that story. And then the other thing that I heard that got to me was that when I read somewhere that all the things that our holy texts are talking about, Bible, the Talmud, everything actually speaks of, first and foremost, of internal qualities. Everything is happening inside of a person. A man is a small world, as a saying, and it's not a euphemism. It's really, quantum scientists already talk about things in those terms, but it's all happening inside your desire, as they say. All those, all that push and pull, all those forces, they're forces inside of a person, and they talk about this, the movement of desires inside of a person into Egypt, into the seat of the will to receive, the seat of the egoism, if you will, and then coming out of Egypt, coming out of that by uniting the desires and reaching a state called Arvut, and reaching a state called as one man in one heart around Mount Sinai, and how Mount Sinai is a Mount Sinai from the word Sinah. It's a mountain of hate. You gather all the hate and friction and contradictions between people, and you cover all of that with love, with an aspiration for something higher. And that was like, oh, that's actually a very interesting way to look at it. So you can start to feel a totally new feeling towards all those different stories, whether you want to also relate to them as historical events that did happen at some point in time, or something of those happened. But there was an internal quality, and I really searched for that. That really appealed to me. And so I'm wondering, I'm asking, and then, we also brought people here on the show, and people talked about how the Bible is really this kind of it's really like it's something that it's a never ending thing. That's why you don't need to continue to write the Bible. It's done. It speaks of this transition from these disparate desires all uniting into one, reaching a connection with the upper force. That's the goal of the whole craziness. And that's why every Passover you have to talk about the Exodus from Egypt. Why? we're out of Egypt. Why do we have to go back to? Because you're still in Egypt, my friend. You're still stuck in the grips of your egoism. You're still thinking about yourself first and foremost. And we're trying to free ourselves from that. And so they were saying, people were saying that you can read the Bible today and it will apply to you what's happening today. There's people, I just saw someone quoted, again, you could say coincidence, that the story of Purim, the fall of the Persian king was like this Thursday, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so coincidence, but it's just interesting that that we're living in this almost like this this big play that's playing out for you. What are you doing with it? So my question to you is what are you doing with all of that knowledge, all this questioning and all the following the footsteps of the Bible? What are you making of it for today, for right now? And when you answer, tie it a little bit, if you can, just to make it more complex for you, tie it to this pressure that we're feeling on the Jewish people, this pressure we haven't felt the likes of it since really the Holocaust. that kind of almost global pressure on the Jews to do for something. We'll talk about that. What's that thing? But just talk about that. How do you see that playing out today, and the Bible and its role in your life today?
Yeah. Well, I think you made really good points about how the Bible essentially is cyclical, right? It's always relevant, almost every time, when you're reading, especially when you're reading through the weekly Torah portion, right? It just seems like this portion is so relevant for now. And why? Why do we feel that? First of all, right? Let's just ask that question, for every Jewish person that is following the weekly Torah portion, readings, stories, relevance to your life, and ask yourself, why is it relevant to me? As I'm reading this, I'm going, oh yes. And it's something, it's the power of storytelling. And that's something about the Bible that I think is so powerful. It tells the story of humanity through a people, through Israel. Yeah. I mean, it does single out a people, but it is the story of the world as well. It's the story of humanity. And every person on planet Earth, to my opinion, and also my experience, okay, because I have friends from all over the world, many Christians from around the world, globally, who read the Bible, and they have that same experience. They have that same exact testimony, if you like, that they can testify and say, oh yeah, that's me too, right? I just read this today, and it's so relevant for right now. And they'll share that with me. And I just think it's just the power of God's word that is so powerful that it supersedes time, I guess is the word. I'm hard with English, but it surpasses time, and everything. Whereas, Shakespeare, it wouldn't have been relevant in Abraham's day. Honestly, I don't think it would have been relevant in the time of Babel.
Not only that, you can't talk to Shakespeare, but you could talk to Abraham. Probably you could get along with Abraham pretty well. The same language, right?
Exactly, right. But it's like things that are a big hit now to us in our generation and our lifespan now, that are what we consider to be great works of poetry, of whatever, film. Like that film, it's so relevant. So relevant. But 30 years from now, it's not going to be relevant. Or let's say 100 years from now, it's not going to be relevant. It's going to be different circumstances, different realities. The Terminator is not going to be an issue, because 100 years from now, we solved that problem with AI and the machine that's going to kill us, for example, right? For all the film nerds out there. So I'm just saying, depending on the time and season you're in, or take the Terminator and again, bring it back to the time of Abraham and those guys. They're like, what are you talking about? The machine's going to, what machine, what are you talking about? But the Bible, right? That was literally being lived out by the patriarchs, and then the prophets and so on later, right? And then writing those writings down, and then them getting canonized into scripture, and that all of that, whatever was canonized and collected, because there's plenty that wasn't, by the way, for anybody who cares and wants to do a deep dive, there's plenty of little books and prophets and whatever that just weren't added, and you can read what they have to say as well. A lot of Christians like the Book of Enoch, for example, etc. But all that to say that, to me, it is something that you just have to accept. Okay, this is a force of nature that you can't stop. You can't prevent it. It is what it is, and it will impact you. It will affect you, and it does affect us. Just today, or just recently, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, wrote a powerful message to Trump, right? And what do you think impacted that powerful? To me, it was I was like, wow,
that was a strong statement. That was a strong
talk about a mensch, this guy is a mensch, and I've had the privilege of being involved in some of the people around him, and also help any case, I can't go into details, but point being is, these are people that they live their lives as devout Christians who read the Bible, and that affects him, their policy making as the person of today. If I were the Haman of today, right? If I were the Mordecai of today, what would I do? If I were in their shoes, that is playing out in their minds, because that story is playing out in their minds of whatever they have read in the Bible, and they're living out that reality through themselves and saying, well, if I'm put in this position, then I must X, Y, Z, right? And so it impacts the way you live your life. And for me, for example, when it comes to, like you talked about Mount Zion, or technically Sinai, but what becomes the place of pilgrimage to Sinai? It's not Sinai. Sinai gets left behind, in the narrative, in the Jewish story. It's the tabernacle that carries the glory of God from Sinai, and all that revelation and all that amazingness that happened to the people of Israel and everything they witnessed. And it literally leaves the locale of Mount Sinai, and nobody goes back there except for, I think it's Elijah, when he's running away from Ahab and so on. And then again, God's kind of like, what are you doing? Where are you going? Get your butt back over here. There's nothing to go. You're going nowhere. That road doesn't lead you anywhere. You need to go back to where the story continues. It takes you to Israel, right? They pass Gilgal. They go to Eval, and they build it, probably according to the experts, the first altar known as Joshua's altar today. Right. Okay. And then they go to Shiloh, right? Right. Yeah. 369 years. The tabernacle is there, which is, for people to understand, this is the revelation of God. This is God's
very special place, by the way.
Yes.
My friend was just there just a few weeks ago before the start of the war. He was also a filmmaker. He was there on a shoot. They get to the place, and they're all ready. All the gear, they have batteries, everything. They get to the place, all the batteries drain, nothing works. They're like, what's happening here? They're not like mystic people, but it's like, something is up. Really powerful.
It's unusual. It's unusual. Exactly. It's unusual. We filmed, so anybody who goes to watch the I Am Israel, the Mountain of the King, we film a sequence there, and all these places I'm mentioning, by the way, those are all in the film. And why are we telling that? Because people need to understand our film is directed towards Christians, of course, but again, anybody who cares about the Bible, you need to understand that these are real, powerful stories, not just for back then, but for today. And God is trying to speak to us, I believe, to the world, but most specifically to Israel, because Israel has a responsibility, I believe, to be a nation of priests, as it says, or in other words, to be a reflection of that revelation of God that was given to Moshe, given to the Levites and the priests and so on, and for us to live out as examples of what's the right way to be as human beings.
Okay,
right?
Hold on. Stop. Let me stop you here. This is really at the heart of everything we're saying. It only took us 20 minutes to get. So this is good. The thing is, I'm sure you noticed that when you talk to people, there's people who it's very easy for them to lean in that direction. They're either by the way they were raised, or what they studied, or the way they're open a certain way, and they will, yes, of course, it feels right. And then there's those who like, no, that's crazy talk. Forget about God that we can't even speak of. But all that stuff, and why single out the Jews, and why call attention to the Jews, and why we're just like everyone. I imagine this goes without saying, listening to you, that you feel that specialty, that uniqueness, and it's not a uniqueness that requires that positions you in a position of superiority, but rather a position of service, of responsibility, because there's a real understanding of that position in humanity. If humanity needs to rise to a certain place, and someone's got to show the way, it's just natural. and there happens to be this group. Why this group? Well, someone had to be picked to do it. It's this group, right? So through all these incarnations from Babylon and Abraham all the way to where we are, it's that group, and people were added to this group, and people left, and people joined, but eventually it's that core group that hasn't grown much in numbers. By the way, Chinese they mushroomed quite nicely, but no, not the Jews. We stayed a small number of people. So how do you find, how are you able to communicate those ideas to people who think that this is craziness, that this is wrong, that this is actually working against us? How do you do that? Because I think that's a really important point, because we're trying to talk to people about those things. And this is one of our main challenges, to even open up to that. Forget God, maybe you're afraid of religion and all whatever baggage you have with it, but there's something big happening here. We were part of something epic. Yeah. How do you get people to join the production? What
It's a good question, because I find that to be I find religion and what religion has done to the world, if it be Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and other religions, you end up with wars. You end up with, like you talked about, you gave an example of, the ladies in a bikini at a bus stop and then having firebombs thrown at them by ultra Orthodox that are like, hey, we don't accept that here. And that was their way of showing it. In other words, people who are religious, people who represent a religion, have acted in horrible ways. And unfortunately, it puts a very bad name on either their faith and or their God that they so-called represent. And so you have baggage, like you said, you have a baggage that comes along with, I believe this, right? So when I say I'm a Jew, the type of anti-Semitic slurs that I've gotten, that, if anybody's watched interviews with Dan Bilzerian, for example, I think he's one of the best examples, because he throws out there a long list of all of these falsities of the Jewish people that are as fact, that's a fact, and that's a fact, and in their Talmud, not their Talmud, and their Talmud, they talk like they know what they're talking. They can't even say, or they can't have any case, and that's kind of like the symptom of the of those who are against. And I think my goal isn't to win people like that over and get them to recognize, hey, Granted. This is God's awesome, and look what he's done, and look at the miracles, because they're not going to see it.
No. I'll narrow it down for you a little bit. What I'm really talking about, the subtext is our own brothers and sisters, Jews. Other Jews. Sure. It goes. I want to start with that, because I can't change the rest of the world. I can't.
Oh, it's not the rest of the world. But what I'm saying is, there's the criticisms of the rest of the world towards the Jewish people, and because of those pressures, right? We don't want to be seen as a symptom. We want to hide from that, because we don't want that negative energy. And so a lot of Jews, right, are either going to be silent. They're going to kind of be quiet and hide and just kind of like not be the gray man, so to speak. And then there are some people that will just leave their faith. I have, a guy that I just had a conversation with. He said, he used to be religious. He isn't anymore. And I go, okay, interesting. And then one of the other guys in the conversation says, well, Doron wants to have prayer on the Temple Mount. What do you think about that? And then he made a kind of a nasty comment about it, right? Because it's his knee-jerk reaction of anti-religion attitude, right? And so I was like, okay, well, why do you feel that way? Why is it you feel that way? I'm curious. I said, I get it. You're like, to you, God is it's something you've left behind, but why, and then he gave all of those examples that, like, the nations also will repeat, we're this, we're that, and blah, blah, all the anti-Godders, if you like, and I'm like, all right, Got you. And so I think the thing is to help those people that have a bad taste in their mouth for religion is that if you represent a faith, and if we're specifically talking about the Jewish people, if you're representing Judaism as a Jew and say that you're religious, then I encourage every one of us, because I also consider myself religious, that you live to a higher standard. And that higher standard is how you treat your fellow man. You can be a religious zealot if you like, and do the tefillin and the prayers, and you're what I'm saying, you're that guy. But if you're crooked in your business dealings, if you're treating others disrespectfully, right? You cut in line and you just act like a total turd, you're putting a bad taste in other people's mouths and making them feel, well, that's what religion is. And so my goal and I feel my responsibility as being representing the religious amongst the community is that is to represent it in a way that is honorable, and that to the point where I've had people say, like one of the guys came up to me and says, because he saw me take off my tzitzit from my uniform, and mind you, we sleep together in the same room and everything. He goes, "Wait, you wear tzitzit? Like you're religious?" Because he's one of the newer guys, to be fair. And I go, "Yeah," and he's like, "Wow, I didn't realize that." And I went, "Perfect." Because I don't want you to have to realize it, because you're always seeing me do the religious things. I'm in your face with my prayer book, right? I'm in your face with doing the mitzvah of praying before I put something in my mouth, like in your face, so to speak. You get what I mean, and anybody who's religious get what I mean, I hope. But for those who are non-religious, you don't really understand. But there's a way of religiosity that's out there, and there's a way of being faithful that doesn't have to be shining and the look at me kind of deal. And I'm not saying the people that do that are that's what they're trying to do, but it's a fine balance. And how do you do that? It's a fine balance, because that's my goal. It's not to make people feel that, because we got the religious guy and, we have to because it's Shabbat now and okay, we can't do this, can't do that. Or, I'm like, guys, you do whatever you want. I'm not going to be that guy that's going to make you feel bad because you're not keeping Shabbat. And, whatever, you want to turn on the light, turn on the light. You want to play music, play music. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, you live the way that you're comfortable, that's good for you. But this is who I am. And it's not going to be in your face. Hopefully that's a good way to explain it. I don't know.
No. First of all, it's such a humble attitude. I love it. And I think it's a very good way of relating what it is and what we're trying to do. Because, and now I'm gonna challenge you some more. When you bring in, okay, so we talked about a little bit about other Jews. We'll get back to them in a second, because this is where it's at. But I want to talk about for a second about anti-Semitism. Obviously, anyone who's around today now understands, sees, feels this attitude coming from everywhere. 10 years ago, you go to an Israeli and you say anti-Semitism, they're like, what? You go to someone in America, like, oh, they say, oh, it's a golden Medina. They love us here. We're the bee's knees. No, it's like, what are you talking about? But then these things start to happen, and now after October 7th and everything that's happening, all the changes in the world, it's clear that there's an issue. Okay, something is up. People have a certain attitude toward the Jews, even those who are not rabid anti-Semites, even those who are not going to go to demonstrations and protests, even those who are not the great ideologues who write books, but just everyday people. People have a certain feeling about Jews. You say Jew, it's not, you say Jew and you say, I don't know, Romanian, whatever. It's not the same. There's a reaction, and what we're trying to ask people. We have an explanation, but I'd love to hear your experience with it and your take on it. Is that, if Jews are meant to be such a great example, and there were times when Jews were that example. Actually, there were a few hundred years where Jews were the prime example for that. From all over the old world, people flocked to Israel, to Jerusalem. That's how Greek philosophy was born. They came here. They interacted with Jews, with what we call today, you could call them Kabbalists, but the people who held the inner core of the wisdom, and they shared it with them. They taught them. They took it back. They called it philosophy. We have philosophers explaining that. Johann Reuchlin talks about his teacher and Plato and all these guys who took all their stuff from the Jews. So it's there. The question is then. And then obviously, fast forward to modern times and all the great additions Jews brought to humanity and morals and ethics and thought and technology and you name it. Why are people not liking the Jews? What's the deal with that? Why people hate Jews? Tell us.
Yeah.
Doron. What's your version of it, at least?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously I've heard all the, the proper, whatever you want, term of it and explanation and many angles of it, because it's something obvious I've also studied for many years as one who is challenged constantly with the nations in the work that I do. A lot of it is kind of geared towards the Christian world, but also just the nations in general, right? Who don't believe per se in God, but defending Israel on a diplomatic level, on a whatever level, and just challenging them and their diplomacy towards our nation, be it from a Christian's roots nation or a non-Christian nation, right? Because that's of course going to depend on that's going to change on how their attitude towards you is going to be. And there's something very powerful that the one of the main how do you call them, apostles to the non-Jewish world. Okay, when Christianity started, it was mostly Jews, or not. They're all Jews.
It was all Jews.
Yeah. I was going to say mostly. They were all Jews. They had maybe some Gentiles in the mix, but essentially what happened is Paul, he basically is the Chabad of the old world that basically advertises Judaism, but contrast to Chabad, it's not to Jews, it's to the nations, the Gentiles. And he said something very powerful to the Gentiles. He says to them, listen, now that you've been part of our faith and you're taking part within us, he warns them. He says, don't be arrogant. Don't be arrogant and think for a minute that you are going to supersede the Jews, like you're going to take their place. And he says, remember that the root bears you and not the other way around. In other words, the root is Israel. You're a branch, a foreign one at that. And he uses what do you call it? Agriculture to explain the idea. He says you're a foreign branch grafted into a good cultivated olive tree. You're grafted in. Remember, if that branch doesn't bear fruit, meaning you, the Gentile, aren't jiving with the Jewish world and our customs and the way we do things, well, God's just going to cut you off and throw you into the fire just as easily as he'll do it with his own people, his chosen people who are living unfaithful to the Torah, is essentially the point he's making. And in other words, don't be arrogant, right? And it's amazing. He warned them, and I think also Peter, who's the head of the early church in Jerusalem, he also warns the Gentiles. And I've always thought about that. Why would they have ever said that? Because there wasn't anti-Semitism back then like it is today. The irony is that out of the fruit of that, of the Gentiles grasping onto this Jewish faith, but then making it their own completely and developing Catholicism out of it, et cetera, and then the history of Christianity and what it becomes. it became anti-Jewish. It became a competition with the Jewish faith in many ways, even. And I always thought to myself, if I were those guys and I'm reading Paul and I'm reading Peter's warnings, what on earth? Are you stupid? Like, how could I say that the Jewish people are no longer relevant and I take their place, which is what's known as replacement theology, etc. And like, are they just like dense? Like, don't they see the warning? And I think it's just human nature. It's human nature because before the church, you had Haman, you had all throughout history, you had those that challenged the Jews. Pharaoh, I mean, hello, right? I mean, throughout all of our history, there's always been a conflict between the people who received the revelation of God, of the one true God, and everyone else that's like, wait, you're better than us? Wait, you mean your God says you can't do this and this, and there's always been, ever since Abraham, there's always been conflict with the other, with those, and also within ourselves, ironically too, that's also an interesting side effect of anti-Semitism is self-hating Jews on top of that, which is totally like bizarre to me as well. It's like, this is crazy. And so the simple answer is, it's a spiritual reality that exists, and it will continue to exist until Mashiach comes, I believe, and basically sorts things out. I don't think humanity is able to supersede it's like gravity. You can't fight it. It's there. Okay? Anti-Semitism is there. But what you can do, and this is my answer to the Gentile, the non-Jew, take Paul's warning and Peter's warning and all of these guys' warnings. Don't be arrogant. You in France, Macron, you arrogant world leader. Like, do you not see your arrogance?
Well, he's French,
It doesn't matter who you are. I mean, Khomeini right now, it doesn't matter. Your arrogance, you people are arrogant. Quit trying to fight God's choice. This is God's choosing. You either accept it and you follow his plan, or you resist it and you will be crushed.
So this solution, this approach is actually very good because it's very clean. It's like, there's this story, there's the Bible, there's this God, this force at the very top of it. We subscribe to it. If you follow that, it's very clear. Don't be arrogant. Don't go against it. Be a good example. Like it's actually pretty organized. It's well organized. And I haven't even asked you, by the way, how would you define a Jew to an alien? This is our favorite question. So think about that for a second. What I do want to ask you is something else. If you, especially people outside of Israel, they're looking through the news and everything. Before the war, before the 7th, even a lot of the friction that was happening here in this country between these two sides, not even left and right, as we discussed it many times. It says small minority and the larger majority. A lot of the stuff that was thrown against the majority was like, oh, this is gonna create this messianic state. Right. You're gonna create this regional war, this Armageddon. People are afraid of those things. This scares people.
Correct.
Right. I mean,
it's fear messaging, 100%.
Well, no, even I have to say it's exciting. When you compare that, a reality show to that, like, that's cool. That's cool. Armageddon in my lifetime. That's cool. You see God coming down, everybody, they're all converging around this one spot in the north of Israel. I get first row ticket. It's it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's cool. Like what do you have to do? You have to read your paper and go to the beach on Saturday. That's your biggest alternative. Right. And I'm exaggerating because I know, I grew up in a house also that was kind of like, afraid of this, religious, they're going to coerce us, impose on us all kinds of customs we want to do. I don't want to bless before I eat the food. Like you said, I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. I want to just live my life. That was the, people who came from totalitarian countries in Europe and from the war. I just want to be a free spirit, even though that's an illusion. We know there's no such thing. You're not really free. You're a slave to something. You're always working under some kind of force that's on top of you. And you can decide, I want to work for the biggest force, I'm going to go work for the big boss, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's a calculation. That's a process that people are going through, for, their entire lifetimes sometimes. But right now, if you talk to people, when you put things on the table and with such clarity and conviction, the average person, the non-religious, definitely people who are not Jews, it can be stressful. It can sound a little like, I don't want that. It's too much. It's too much on my nervous system. I didn't sign up for this big clash between Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and whoever else. I don't want it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like Star Wars. I don't want a Darth Vader. Give me this happy fairy tale, nice, easy-going story.
Exactly.
Why do I have to be that dude that has to go and like fight this big, scary dude that can like crush me with his whatever, right? Yeah.
Give me Harry Potter. Harry Potter's nice.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
And what people are not realizing is that the Jew, the real human, we talk about human Adam, the word Adam from the word Domeh, to resemble the upper one. That is the real destiny of humanity. We want to rise from this level of existence, and we can. And it's nature's plan that it's pushing everybody in that direction, whether you like it or not. How do you help someone enlist into this worldview? Because again, to me, even though you and I, we may have slightly different language in some areas, and your very unique background and my unique background, and everybody's unique, really. But I feel you 100%. And if I were to, if you were to bring me on your podcast and we would talk about really the Kabbalistic and everything and how it's, I would tell you, yes, these wars have to be fought. They don't have to be fought outside on the battlefield. They can be fought inside of you if you want to be up to the challenge. But that's what it's about. You have to fight it one way or another. If you're not going to fight it inside, you're going to have to fight it on the outside. But you have to be part of this light versus darkness type of thing that's unfolding here.
Yeah.
How do we enlist people to that big campaign? What do we do? Doron.
Well, first of all, I just also want to go back on the last thing I was saying about, the arrogance of the Gentiles. It's not just the Gentiles that have that problem. It's also the Jewish people. There's an arrogance of we are different, and they notice and they see it, and I get that challenge, like, oh, you guys think you're better than us. I don't, but I know some Jews do. They do speak in such a way that they get this idea that somehow, they're better than everyone else because of blah, blah, blah. And so the knife cuts both ways. That warning that Paul gives to the Gentile, it's also, pointing back at you as a Jew, who's the one who's supposed to be that light to the Gentiles, that, well, then you should live up to that standard that I, the Gentile, should copy. And so ultimately, I would say, back to this question you're asking, it all plays into that. It's like either you can go, I don't know, worship some rock, and there's people around the world. That's what they do. I mean, I've been to Asia and I've seen people that are empty. They don't have life in them, and they're searching for meaning. They're searching for something to worship. And, and like you said, you're going to be a slave to someone. You kind of were wording it. And that's a good point. You're going to be a slave to something. Either you're going to be a slave to your job, you're going to be a slave to your passion of creating music or movies or whatever it is. Something is going to be your master, so to speak, that you're going to feel.
You're going to serve. Yeah, you're going to have to serve.
You're going to have to serve. And the way I look at it is this: my life without God, which was a very short period in my life, but it was the fruit of abuse and just horrible upbringing. Horrible, but certain part of it got really bad, and I was a very angry, bitter kid that had a lot of darkness over them. But when I got God in my life, it changed me as a human being. It made me a better person. And as I continued that trajectory of seeking God, and letting, and you know what? When you're honest with yourself, like you were also saying, it's something about, you just have to be honest with yourself and realize, like it or not, it's going to be an external battle or an internal battle. And I think the more aggressive we are with ourselves and with challenging the maut of the ben adam, the mahut sheli, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Why is the questioning, right? What scientists do. And that's what I love about science, by the way. People that are, some religious people are like terrified of science. I love science. Science is strengthening my faith even more so. Any case, but it's
but Rav Kook said science and religion are not at odds. They're simply two points of view of the same thing.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it, because it's, to me, scientists, religious people, whatever, philosophers, when you're seeking truth and you're on that trajectory, it's going to make you a better person. More so if you also apply those truths to your life and your actions. It's going to tikkun olam. It's going to create a better world atmosphere. If you want to be a bitter Grinch that says there's no God and that all those religious people are the reason for all the bad in this world, but you're not looking at the ones that you've never heard, that you've never seen, that are quiet, beautiful human beings that you and I will probably never know their names. But to me, those are going to be the so-called saints, you know what I mean? In the world to come, that Hashem's going to go say, everybody, You're like, well, what about Rav Kook? What about Akiva? What about, they're like, this guy, this lady over here, it's going to be people that you've never heard their name. And the reason why they're great is not because they so-called impacted humanity in a way, because we all have different callings, I guess you can call it, or different giftings. Not everybody's supposed to be a front man person, that all the attention and they kind of lead or whatever. They're just quiet people that do amazing mitzvot and good deeds, or however you want to say in English, that you'll never hear of those people. I'll give you an example. The other day, just recently, my friends and I were eating out in Beersheba. And we were done with our meal, and we came to pay, and they said the person that was has a guest here had paid for your meal, and we said, I want to thank him. Oh, they've already gone, but just so you know, your meal's taken care of. You know what I'm saying? That was a quiet, good deed, not looking for a thank you. It was the ultimate way of what's it of tzedakah, okay, what is known as the highest form of tzedakah. There's lots of ways, in other words, to just be a better person. And to me, faith, God, having a framework, it helps me be that. If I were to live my life without knowing the Bible, without learning the sages' teachings, without getting like you were talking about, like getting perspective of things that you just thought you do by just face value of reading the Bible, but then hearing the sages talk about these deep secrets, so to speak, of what meaning is in there. And then also you're going to get that. The more you dive into God's word, the more you seek God, I believe, the more revelation you get as a person on your bandwidth, if you like. You might not be a Rav Kook, but you're going to, for me, it's going to be this little skinny cable, this little guy, that's my bandwidth, and great on the sages, but this is what I'll be getting. And I'm happy with that, because that's what God created me to be, a conduit to heaven, to earth, to humanity. And the better we are at just doing that and seeking that, you're going to be a better human being. You're going to love your life more. You're going to find meaning. And I've met a lot of people that are, I would say without God, if you like. And it's like their lives feel very much so like without meaning. And I think that's exactly why God chose Israel, because we were better than anyone else, but he had to choose someone. And it's an ambassador, if you like, right? So he chose an ambassador, and he gave that ambassador the revelation of how to be better human beings. And it's to be an Ola Goim. So in other words, it's for humanity. It's not just for them. It's for all of humanity. And we can all benefit from that. But if we just kind of are anti that, and because of the different reasons, though, everybody's got a reason why not. But these are the reasons why yes for me. It's that simple.
So back to that question, with everything you've said, all these great examples, how would you define a Jew to an alien who came here and saw this tiny group that draws so much attention and has so much influence? Who are those people? What is a Jew?
That's a very hard answer to answer, honestly, because hindsight is 2020, right? When we talk about prophecy, for example, when you live out the prophecy, or the prophecy was lived out, you go, oh yeah, of course. But for those who were before it, you're like, how is that going to, pan out, so to speak, right? And in the same way, because of the lack of context, right? Like I can talk to you or to even non-Jews and tell them what a Jew is, and they get it because there's a certain context, a historic context in their psyche, if you like. How do I explain that to someone that has nothing? Like there's no context to glean from, if you like. Wow.
Right.
That's the challenge. And I would say, listen, this is the human species. Yeah. It was created by a higher being, that created this species. And out of the species, they were, they got split into languages, peoples, cultures. And then the one out of this species, okay, it left the rest because they got a revelation of that higher being. Yeah. And they felt, and they got the calling to be that set apart, representative of that higher being, and their children and their families after them had to follow suit with that, right? Because that one head of that being made a covenant, and so they all agreed, and they were stuck to that agreement, and it continued. It worked because the next person in line could have said, heck no, that's stupid. Let's go back to making idols. I can, grandpa was rich. We're dirt poor, forget that nonsense, following this God in the wilderness. But no, they continued, and it was like this magical thing that happened, and you can't really explain why the next one said yes, and then one after that said yes to this calling of a chosen people. And more than that, all the collective whole of the rest of this humanity that was created, they constantly turn on these people and they treat them bad and do horrible things for them. And yet they still believe in this crazy higher being for some reason. And then by miracle, when some, we can't explain it. No matter how big and strong these other beings were, they couldn't crush these little nobodies. They just couldn't do it, and even though they wouldn't believe that they have a higher being that could protect them or do special things for them, they're like, no, that can't be. That's just nonsense. But we can't defeat them, and we keep falling, and we can, and an empire after empire, and these people keep continuing throughout history. So they're very, very unique, and you almost can't explain it. It almost doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. There's no logic behind what happened, but they're still there. Oh, and by the way, they're still living, and they're still thriving, and they're still somehow back in their land, somehow speaking their original language. Somehow we can't explain it, Not, and everyone who came before and tried to destroy them, those people don't exist anymore. But there's newer empires and newer, but they still think that they can destroy this nobodies. So yeah, these are very interesting people. And hopefully you understood my explanation. Oh, weird being from another planet.
This is great. We need a lot of footnotes for that explanation for the higher being. But no, I got everything. I got all the references. This is good. No, I think, yeah, at the end of the day, I think people, we're lazy people. We just want, show me where do I have to sign and what do I get, and just leave me be. But being a Jew is a bit of a hard work. You gotta always kind of feel like you're hanging between heaven and earth, and the weight of the world is on your shoulders a little bit, and
Fiddler on the Roof, right? I mean, literally.
That or A Serious Man by the Coen Brothers, whichever your generation is.
Right.
But it's no, and it's I think that's if it was a little easier, I think even Jews in Israel would be and around the world would be maybe more willing to participate. But it does seem like it requires a lot of a person to constantly be the walking this very, very thin line, always between these two awful options, and somehow the way out is only this tiny eye of a needle at the end. It's constantly having to reconcile oppositions in you. This is great, and we're just buried my best friend, but this is amazing. This constant. It puts a lot of strain on a person. Where do you
100%?
Where do you take
I wouldn't want to be
the. Well, sorry. So, no. Go, finish.
I wouldn't want to be the other. I'll put it that way, because I've seen enough of the world. I've seen enough of humanity that I see a lot of emptiness in this world. I wouldn't want to be those people without purpose, because I've seen so many people. They're so clueless. They're wealthy. I've worked in my security work. I worked for literally some of the wealthiest people in the world. But a lot of these people, I've noticed that without God, they're nothing. They're very powerful. They're very wealthy. They're very, but you can tell there's not real, true joy, happiness, and very few. And I mean, and there are some, very few, you could tell that they have, at least I've noticed it's a God-centric. They're not super ultra religious, whatever, but you can tell they have that as a base. That there's a certain morality, there's certain lines they won't cross. They won't go to the bar with the other guys and go hit on ladies, even though they're married, and he's married, right? So you'll notice very, very rarely you'll see those people, and you're like, okay, and you can tell they're happier than their counterparts. They're equally powerful, equally rich, equally all that thing, but you can tell there's a joy and a happiness in that person, and a purpose. And they act like actual real mensches of human beings. They don't treat other people, and you see how they treat other people. They treat other people like human beings, and you're like, wow, and
this is because they have that connection to.
And again, that's my personal, what I've observation. I could be wrong, but that's what I've witnessed.
No, you can't be wrong. Doron, where do you? And that's the last question I'll bug you with, but it seems like we can hang for much longer. Where do you take the strength to juggle, to go through this, to wake up every day and
with all these,
with everything, corporeally, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, whatever.
Yeah, for me, it's God first and foremost. Without my faith, without my family that helps me with that, with that structure, right? My wife, she's constantly challenging me to be a better man, to be a better leader.
Wives do that.
They do, good wives, and
help
so
against.
Exactly. So I've had an amazing Ezel Nigdo that
Yeah.
has been a real rock, and I think it's when you found that, you found real joy in your life and purpose and ability to be challenged and to do a lot more than you really think you could do beforehand, right? I think we all have our limits in our minds. That's something that I learned a long time ago in the military. Is that there's nothing that you cannot achieve. It's all in your mind. And if you can break through mentally for whatever that wall is that you see as your present wall, in some cases it was an actual literal wall in the physical test that you couldn't scale. But then eventually you figured it out, right? You persevered. And so that is where I get it. I mean, it's not because I'm special in any way at all. I'm just allowing myself to be open to God and to be used by Him, and to be willing to do things that are outside my comfort zone. I'll put it that way. Because I think that's the easiest thing. Just like you said, we're lazy people, myself included. We are all lazy. Nobody wants to get up and do PT and work out and do your prayers and read your Bible or anything like that. It's not something that comes natural to you. But especially me. I mean, I didn't grow up doing tefillin. It's not so. It's not a routine like brushing your teeth. That's so easy. It's something that I have to actively remind myself. Okay, tefillin time. And I think it is just what that is, right? It's embrace the suck, right? It's not going to be easy, but when you embrace the suck, so to speak, and you embrace the challenges of life and the fruit that comes out of it, I'll end with this. One of these Christian guys taught me this, and I love this what's the word? Parable.
Yeah.
He was learning about the agriculture in Israel and why is it that the fruit in Israel, for example, the cherry tomato, has such a powerful flavor than like the ones in Europe or America. And the farmer was explaining, because this was down in the south of Israel in the Negev, and they were growing these amazing fruits and vegetables with amazing flavors. And so the guy explains, he says, the reason why there's such a focus of flavor into that fruit that you just ate is because that fruit had to overcome the challenges of this desert climate. Yeah. The extreme heat in the day and the extreme cold at night. And it's constantly fighting these massive opposites, right? And it's much more challenged, in other words, than a plant up on the Golan Heights or in the Shfela, of Israel. And you can Google that if you don't know what I'm talking about, these geographical areas. And so they were explaining, so these right here are actually unique to Israel's agriculture because of that, because they're fighting against the elements. And I took what he was saying, and I was like, that's exactly our faith walk. If you're willing to be the guy that's going to go through the challenges of the desert versus the one that's in the nice, I don't know, somewhere in Italy where the climate's or Hawaii, where the climate's perfect year round, no challenges at all, man. Easy going. Yeah, man. That life is something that we all want to fairy tale imagine that's perfect life. But in reality, it's a good place to vacation. And in reality, the challenges of your life at work or your relationship with your wife and kids, etc., in our reality, that's again the desert. It's war. It's friends that were lost. It's the tragedies of October 7th and the post of that, and the tragedies of was it over 20 people that have been murdered by these ballistic attacks. Those challenges are what make us. And there's a big if you allow God to use those to chisel you as a human being, so to speak, and try to search and say, God, why? And ask him why. It's not all roses, roses. I don't know how you say it, but it's not all, it's not all perfect because you're a person who, embraces God in your life and, it's all going to go great. Quite the contrary. I've learned, at least, you're going to make a lot of enemies, and for places you've never expected. But your life is better when, again, you embrace all of those challenges and make the best of it and let God work through that in your life and in your character and make you as a better human being. And you'll be shocked with the results if you do that. But I think most people, they run away from the challenge. They immediately give up when the weight of life just presses in on you too much, and you just let that weight drop and say, hey, forget it. I'm done with this. I don't need this bodybuilding nonsense, leave that to Schwarzenegger, and that's how we live our lives.
We're back to the Terminator.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's, I think that right there is where it all, it boils down to, really.
Wow. Brilliant. Doron, this was heart opening. What do you want to say? Just 2 words about I'm Israel, where people can watch it. Just a couple of words on that, because I know this is a project near and dear to you. So plug that in.
Yeah. Well, I'm just very excited actually about I Am Israel, the Mountain of the King. David Kern is an incredible human being. He's a Christian from Tennessee that came and visited Israel as a filmmaker. And he was like, why haven't I never seen any Christian films about Judea, Samaria, about the Jewish people and these stories of people that he was interacting with that were really blowing his mind, as far as I've never heard this story told to us, to my community. And so he made I Am Israel the first film to do just that to the Christian audience, to his people, if you like. And then I met him actually through friends of friends. He showed us the trailer and I lit up. I said, man, I am looking for a director to film a film about the Temple Mount, what I'm into, that feels like this and has a messaging like this that's positive and doesn't talk about the negative, Gog Magog, the wars, the Muslims, the this, that, none of the negativity. But I want people to see the Temple Mount the way God sees the Temple Mount. When you read scripture, he doesn't talk about the challenges of you shall make me a house and I shall dwell in it. He doesn't talk about the challenge of doing it. He just says, do it. He talks about Jerusalem being the navel of the earth, being the glory of which God will bless the earth with. That's the way God sees it. Can I make a film and find a director that can highlight it and show it that way? And so when I saw that positive vibe that he had in his first film, I made that stupid comment because, I was just so excited. And he just looked at me like, okay, bro, like, what is this guy? But then we started to become friends. And then about a year later, he says, Doron, he calls me up. He says, Doron, guess what? I'm making a sequel. I said, that's awesome, brother. And he says, guess what? You're going to be in it. And I started laughing. And I said, come on, seriously. He says, no, seriously, you're going to be one of the main characters. And guess what else? It's going to be on the Temple Mount. I said, come on, you're kidding. I said, no, I'm not. And that gave birth to I Am Israel, the Mountain of the King, that essentially highlights the importance and beauty of the gift that God gave Israel, which is the Temple Mount. And we just talk about that Genesis from Sinai. And I mentioned here on this interview a little bit about that journey that we take people on. And it's just a beautiful film that really, really will if you don't even care about these subject matters on a faith-based issue, just the fact that it shows you Israel like never before in a cinematic way that is just gorgeous, which is also part of our passion, was to just highlight the beauty of Israel. People that even visit Israel and been here will say that's not Israel. And I've had those reactions from pre-screenings, and it's so wonderful to watch people and Israelis tell me that's not Israel. I'm like, bro, that's in Israel. And I tell them where, and they're like, no way.
So that's where can they watch it?
You Google I Am Israel film.com, or just I Am Israel film. I'm not sure if it's the whole website.
We'll
but,
find it. We'll put it in the description.
And then you just go into movie, sequel, and you'll find I Am Israel, the Mountain, the King, and you can get the digital download if you want to watch it instantly, or Blu-ray and DVD options that we have just gotten in as of recent. So it's a pretty awesome project. It took us about almost 5 years to produce. Wow. Yeah, because of COVID, because of wars.
Yeah.
So production got a little stumped, but the end result is really amazing, and I'm very excited.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We may have to have a conversation about the Templeman, but we'll save that for another time. Doron, before we close, what we do always on the Jew Function is we invite a guest to read a short passage from the sources. In this case, I chose something for you from the Book of Zohar, from Tetzaveh, and in the desert where you saw. That's the section. Please give it a read. I think it's very apropos to what we talked about today.
All right, here we go. And this is the English translation of it.
That is, of course, the English.
Right? Yeah. There is no light except for that which comes out of that darkness. This is so because when that side surrenders, the Creator rises above and his glory grows. Also, the work of the Creator is only out of darkness. There is no good except from within the bad. And when one enters a bad way and leaves it, the Creator rises in his glory. Hence, the perfection of everything is good and bad together, and to later depart to the good. And there is no good except for that which comes out of the bad. And in that good, the glory of the Creator increases, and this is complete work. I have dyslexia and a few other issues, so thank you for those of you bearing with us on that reading.
Any radiant missiles and sleepless nights. This was brilliant. Doron, thank you so much. I think it captures beautifully a lot of what we talked about. Man, it was great to meet you, especially under the circumstances. I know we pushed back this talk a couple of times, and then the missiles, and then this and that. But I'm happy it happened. I'm happy you're in our circle. I got your number. You got mine. Let's be good examples to the world. It's not the easiest job in the world, but it's probably the best. So I invite everyone to follow the Jew Function everywhere. Like, comment, subscribe, of course, here on Spotify. Leave a little review. It always helps. And just spread this conversation because more people need to hear it. And I think it's bringing a bit more light to the world. So thank you, Doron. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. This is the Jew Function.